We're live.
Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome to Distant Dat, 8/25, August 25th. I decided that what we're going to
Lost your audio.
should work now. Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3.
There you are. All good.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
All good.
All right. Here we are again. Elizabeth Battistoni, free gifts, her new book, Capitalism and the Politics of Nature, on theautonomouscollective.net. So to share this, we're going to start with the introduction. I've included from my last time when she was doing a podcast with the historical materialism folks. So that's in our little set of reading stuff. But I managed to find some of the text available. And so we're going to start reading it. Let me start with the introduction, and then we will get to the meat of the text itself. So today we're going to look at the introduction. We may not get through the whole thing and may only get half done and perhaps finish it tomorrow. So that's kind of where we are, what we're going to do. And I hope we'll all be okay with this. In the endless expanse of the universe, in the endless expanse of the universe, every living thing we know or exists within a thin layer spanning just a few hundred meters of a single planet, Earth. This space of life, sometimes termed the critical zone, is as large relative to the Earth as an apple's skin to its flesh. If this zone is small relative to the vastness of space, however, it nevertheless supports an astonishing array of life. Sea stars at the sunless, frigid bottom of the ocean, and pikas in the upper altitudes of the Himalayas, over 1,000 species of ant in the Amazon rainforest alone, or at least it has. Today, many of the Earth's beings are not doing well. 1 million species presently stand at risk of extinction. The last 40 years alone have seen the loss of an estimated 50% of vertebrate wildlife. The vast majority of vertebrates living on Earth today are domestic animals bred in factory farms for human consumption. Livestock now constitute 60% of mammals and 70% of birds. Plant life, too, has been drastically remade. Vast forests have been felled for timber. Plains and marshlands have been steadily converted to monocrop plantations and pasture or cleared to make way for roadways and suburban sprawl. Others face more oblique dangers. As global temperatures warm, bristlecone pines that have stood for millennia are threatened by the migration of unfamiliar pests and increasingly frequent wildfires. As Arctic snow melts earlier each year, the eggs of the birds that breed on Siberian tundra hatch too late to feed on the insects that emerge from the frozen ground, decimating their populations. Artificial lights disorient insects and turtles. Artificial noise disrupts the communication of birds and whales. Catastrophic climate change is, of course, the most pressing and obvious ecological challenge we now face. though hardly the only one. Global temperatures have already risen an estimated 1.1 degrees centigrade from pre-industrial temperatures, and this rise is projected to reach 2.5 degrees centigrade or more by the end of the century. While as recently as a decade ago, climate change was still viewed as a problem of the distant future, its effects are increasingly obvious in the here and now. In the punishing heat waves that have swept through India and Europe, wildfires in Australia and flooding in Pakistan, mega droughts in the American West and the Horn of Africa, cyclones striking Mozambique, and hurricanes devastating Caribbean island states. The acceleration of its underlying causes, too, is an astonishingly recent phenomenon. More carbon has been emitted since the fall of the Berlin Wall, or as David Wallace Wells observes, since the premiere of Seinfeld, than in all previous human history. This is a crisis not only for non-human beings, nor even for self-proclaimed nature lovers or environmentalists. It is a crisis for everyone presently living on Earth, though it affects some far more immediately and severely than others. Millions of people around the world, including most indigenous peoples, rely directly on wild plants and animals for sustenance. Billions more peoples rely indirectly on other species, wild insects that pollinate crops, marshes that filter water, root systems that ward off erosion. Every single one of us relies on other beings to keep the planet habitable, on the microbes in the soil, plankton in the oceans, and forests spanning huge swaths of the globe, without which the Earth's atmosphere would not support plant and human life. The planet once seemed to exist beyond us, offering a stable background against which human lives and dramas could unfold. The mounting evidence that this is no longer the case, that in fact it has never been the case, has prompted a reckoning in many quarters. In political discourse, it has become routine in recent years to the point of cliché to describe climate change as a quote-unquote existential threat. Scientists have proposed naming a new geological era, the Anthropocene, marked by the entrance of human activity into the fossil record. Humanists and social science, once content to leave nature to environmentalists, have called for a drastic rethinking of the precepts of Western thought, and perhaps for abandoning them altogether. In economics, however, the astonishing transformations of our planet are frequently attributed to a surprisingly narrow cause, the absence of price. As the economist Nicholas Stern observed in his landmark paper on the economics of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions are externalities and represent the biggest market failure the world has seen. In other words, the effects of accumulating greenhouse gases are not factored into the prices of market goods, and as a result, are not taken into account in economic decisions. The use of the Earth's atmospheric and water cycles as an emissions sink, similarly, is typically costless, despite their nearly infinite value to humans and non-human life. So too are biodiversity and ecosystem loss traced to the literal pricelessness of many non-human species, ecologies, and organisms. The economist Pavan Sukta, for example, argues that the economic invisibility of nature has serious consequences insofar as no one pays to preserve the Amazon's rain factory or for insects' pollination services. Although it is the likes of peat bogs and bees that keep life possible and bearable, the economic journalist Jonathan Guthrie notes in the Financial Times, quote, "We have not typically attributed any value to them. This," he adds, "seems like a mistake." The gap between these two discourses, that is, the language of existential threat and that of economic error, is vertiginous. The idea that the end of the world might come about as the result of an accounting blunder tilts into absurdity. Is it really possible that this mistake could bring an end to life on Earth as we know it? And if so, why hasn't it been corrected? For if this is a mistake or a failure, it is one that is proven enduringly difficult to rectify. The paradox of nature's non-value is a persistent one in political economic thought. Similar observations have been made for decades, even centuries, by the classical economist Jean-Baptiste Say, J.B. Say, and the feminist economist Marilyn Waring, by the neoclassical economist Arthur Pigou, and the ecological economist Herman Daly, and by many more beside. At the same time, it is perplexing to regularly encounter claims that nature is endangered because it does not appear in the market. After all, capitalism famously puts a price on everything. It is notoriously merciless in its disregard for moral value, religious belief, sentimental attachment, family ties, and cultural practice. The realm of the market perpetually expands, stripping ever wider swaths of the world for parts. Markets regularly destroy the things that are bought and sold, such that everything precious must be protected from them. Or at least so generations of critics have claimed. But if capitalism is characterized by relentless commodification, then its continued failure to value many things in nature is puzzling. It suggests a different question than the one usually asked. Not why shouldn't these incredibly useful activities be commodified, but rather why haven't they been? This problem, I argue, is much more profound than has typically been acknowledged and deserves more careful critical attention than it has received. That is what this book is about. Capitalism's persistent failure to value non-human nature and what it means for politics, as well as for our collective future on this planet. Capitalism, this book argues, systematically treats nature as a quote-unquote free gift, something that can be taken without payment or replenishing, something that is materially useful, but that tends not to appear in exchange. This is not an accident or an oversight. Rather, it's foundational to how capitalism works. The politics of nature. To name capitalism as the driving force of contemporary ecological transformations is typically to invite the charge of reductionism. Capitalism is important, many acknowledge, but it is only a subset of a much deeper problem with human relationships to nature. The climate crisis, it's often said, requires us to rethink the basic frameworks with which we interrogate the world, including the relationship between politics and nature itself. Indeed, for much of the history of modern political thought, the very idea of politics of a politics of nature might have seemed unintelligible. Politics is usually understood to be a distinctly human activity, perhaps even the defining human activity, while nature describes the world as it operates independently from human action. Politics concerns the realm of decisions about how things will and ought to be, while nature names that which simply is and cannot be changed. Politics describes the actions of human subjects, nature, the human backdrop against which they play out. Nature is the most present in political thought as landscape or metaphor, resource or territory. The driving force of much Enlightenment thought was the imperative to separate the natural from the political, to debunk superstition, deflate myths, and disenchant the world. The distinction between nature, that is, how things are, and politics, how things are made, has stood, Jerry Cohen, argues as, quote, the foundation of all social criticism, unquote. Only if something could be otherwise, after all, do we have grounds to challenge it. Yet the distinction between nature and politics has also long been questioned from the vantage point of indigenous ontologies and feminist phenomenologies, and in the last few decades by ecological thought. Ecologists remind us that human beings are part of nature, dependent on and unavoidably connected to other kinds of life. In recent decades, the reality of interdependence is brought into ever starker relief by the worsening climate crisis, and yet the crisis has also scrambled our coordinates for what a politics of nature might be. On the one hand, anthropogenic climate change has crowned a growing suspicion of the category of nature itself. In 1989, Bill McKibben famously declared the end of nature, claiming that human modifications of the atmosphere meant that a world standing apart from human beings had ceased to exist. We have ended, Bill McKibben argued, the thing that has, at least in modern times, defined nature for us, its separation from human society. Many argued in response that nature had never really been separate from human society at all. Environmental scholarship has long interrogated the idea of nature, scrutinizing its representation in culture and language, science and discourse, art and politics. Nature has been thoroughly dissected and deconstructed, debunked, and defanged. Time and time again, it has turned out that those invoking nature, scientists included, have imported their own social values into their arguments, whether intentionally or accidentally. All too often, the invocation of nature has conveniently justified the status quo. At times, the idea of nature has seemed not only the most complex in the English language, as Raymond Williams once suggested, but so complex as to be unusable altogether, too liable to act as ideological cover, too imbued with moral and cultural expectation, too rooted in Cartesian dualism or Baconian domination. The one thing it certainly is not is natural. The idea of nature, scholars have concluded, was a thoroughly human construction long before climate change appeared on the scene. Climate change, then, simply confirms that nature is political all the way down. On the other hand, the worsening climate catastrophe has also been received as the return of nature, this time as an autonomous world of inhuman matter, unvanquished by human fantasies of control and indifferent to human perceptions. The climate crisis, Dipesh Chakrabarty argues, is about waking up to the rude shock of the planet's otherness. It is about remembering the force of an inhuman nature that exists beyond our representation and manipulation. If the idea of nature is no longer viable in other worlds, actually existing nature, the physical force of the material world is as lively as ever. The environment, in turn, is not just a passive medium that surrounds us, but something actively made by living beings, ourselves included. Our human world is populated by countless non-human agents, from the billions of carbon molecules accumulating in the atmosphere to the microbes that circulate in our food and guts. Climate change, therefore, forces us Climate change, therefore, forces us to confront the aspects of our world that we have not made and do not control. It reveals that the modern project of bending nature to our will has failed once again. When Chakrabarty, like McKibben, confronts the end of an assumed separation between nature and society, he's beset by the opposite anxiety that climate change signifies not the end of nature, but the end of the social, the end of a distinctively human history. Climate change reminds us that the achievements we attribute to human action and ingenuity rest on material conditions that we have often taken for granted, but no longer can. Perhaps what we have called civilization is really the contingent stability of the Holocene era. Perhaps what we moderns have called freedom is really just the product of fossil fuels. To understand the world today, some charge, we have to look more closely at this other nature. Not nature as idea, but as vibrant matter. Nature as the multitude of non-humans that make up our shared world. We must turn from the global to the planetary, Chakrabarty argues. We must come down to Earth, Bruno Latour insists. Taken together, these revelations seem to point in opposite directions. On the one hand, we live on a human planet and thus on a thoroughly political planet. Yet, on the other, we live on an inhuman Earth, replete with agencies we do not control or even understand. The implications are often dizzying. To make sense of this predicament, we are called on to interrogate our received wisdom, challenge our assumptions, revise our concepts, freedom, responsibility, action. William Connolly, for example, argues that we must, quote, rethink old ideals from the ground up, close quote, in light of what we know about planetary forces. Kara knew Daggett that, quote, the ontological shift forced upon us by the Anthropocene also upends our understanding of politics, close quote. Quote, we inherit a world that no available political category is designed to manage, Pierre Charbonnier declares, and quote, therefore, we're faced with a seemingly impossible task, close quote. If climate change is transforming our planet in unprecedented ways, however, the reflections it has prompted are not as unprecedented as we tend to imagine. We do confront a set of novel and daunting challenges, but so too have all political thinkers past. The project of political theory is fundamentally one of coming to terms with a world in flux. The political categories we now see as mundane, mass politics, democracy, the modern state, were once unprecedented in their own right. For that matter, even the ecological challenge to political thought is less novel than it might seem. That is, for decades, work in environmental political theory has asked whether ecological precepts are compatible with core traditions and concepts of modern political thought, and considered how they might be reconciled. The growing relevance of these analyses only reiterates their fundamental point that nature cannot stand apart as a set of issues or ideas to which political theory can be simply applied. Rather than cordoning nature off from politics or abolishing the distinction altogether, this book starts from the premise that nature pertains to politics of all kinds, not only those issues we tend to think of as environmental. Instead of treating politics as the organization of human life, to be distinguished from the scientific or technical organization of non-human matter, it holds that to organize human life is also always a material enterprise and hence a natural one. All of our actions play out in a material world, whether or not they are explicitly posed as environmental or consciously take the more than human world into account. And this means that decisions about how to relate to other human beings are always inevitably decisions about how to arrange the world around us. This premise does not mean, however, that nature and politics are identical. As ambiguous as it has often turned out to be, because we have smuggled politics into our ideas of nature or hidden the material foundations of our politics, some distinction between nature and politics remains essential to the latter. Denaturalization remains a bedrock of critique, vital for interrogating seemingly immutable phenomena and locating their political dimensions. But efforts to denaturalize institutions and relationships often run the risk of dematerializing them, of detaching politics from the material world we call nature altogether. Political thought, then, must undertake denaturalization alongside rematerialization. It must attend to the physical reality of the world while critically assessing the social relations in which it is situated. We do not need a new idea of nature to motivate care for the more than human world, or a conception of nature set apart from human artifice that we can protect from our interference. What we do need is a sense of what we can make of the world we're given, of what we can hold ourselves and others responsible for, of what must be as it is and what can be otherwise. We need a better sense, too, of how the more than human world works and how precisely we are remaking it. Through what kinds of relationships and practices, institutions and structures. We don't need to rethink political theory from the ground up. In other words, we simply need to look at it aslant so as to better glimpse the places where the politics of nature already appear and the tools we already have to make sense of it. A central claim of this book is that one of the densest sites of interaction between nature and politics is in the material realm we call the economy. While historians of political thought have often written of industrialization or capitalism or modernity, they have too rarely attended to the transformations of the more than human world that these phenomena entail. But it is in the economy that the matter given by nature is transformed into human artifacts. that wild flora become crops and fauna become livestock, that minerals become resources and long decayed organisms become fuel. These interactions are structured, moreover, by a particular kind of economy, at present the one that encompasses nearly all the world, that is capitalism. Capitalism is now the political economic system upon which all human beings now rely for our livelihoods and for our lives, how we obtain food and clothing, shelter and comfort, how we attend to our wants and needs. We're used to thinking about capitalism as a particular way of organizing economic production and exchange, perhaps even as a way of ordering social life writ large. But capitalism inadvertently orders and reorders relationships among human beings along many dimensions beyond even the space of the workplace or market. It reorganizes, too, the relationships in the more than human world, all the way down to the molecular makeup of the atmosphere itself. Its emergence is perfectly correlated to the steady rise of carbon emissions. Its more recent triumph over the globe to the near total decimation of other species. In the course of constructing vast factories, excavating massive mines, and monocropping fields, capitalism has also reconstructed the very biosphere. Capitalism, in other words, is not only a system for making and exchanging goods, nor even for making the social world in which we live. Today, it is the dominant world-making force, and more than that, the dominant planet-making force. To understand the politics of nature today, then, we must understand how capitalism both represents nature socially and makes use of it materially, and this is what the free gift of nature can help us apprehend. The free gift of nature. I take the description of nature as a gift from the classical political economists who wrote in the 18th and 19th centuries amid the rise of the industrial capitalism that has so transformed the modern world. To thinkers like Adam Smith and Jean-Baptiste Say, the role of non-human elements in production was evident and frequently remarked upon. Nature, the physiocratic thinker and Robert Jacques Turgot argued, makes a pure gift to production. Elements like water, air, and light, Say observed, are spontaneous gifts of nature to human consumption. Smith made note of the work that nature does in agriculture. David Ricardo lauded the abundance of natural agents that perform their work gratuitously. Elements ranging from trade winds to soil fertility, they noted, alternately enhanced, combined with, and substituted for human labor. Nature, these thinkers agreed, clearly made useful and necessary contributions to nearly all forms of production, even if they did not always agree on how these contributions should be characterized. These depictions of nature as a gift echo a broader tradition of Western thought in which nature is a gift from God, ostensibly to all of humanity. Jean-Jacques Rousseau mused on natural man who enjoyed the gifts nature offered him without a thought of extracting them. Even John Locke noted that the gift of the earth and of the fruit and beasts produced by the spontaneous hand of nature belonged to everyone, at least before those fruits are plucked by an industrious laborer. As these examples suggest, the fruits of nature have often had different valences even within the Western tradition. Sometimes they're understood as a recognition of human superiority. Locke, for example, claims that God gave inferior creatures to humanity for the express purpose of our use. For Kant, too, human beings have an equal share in the gifts of nature, yet the sign of truly human reason, that which raises man above the animals, comes in our realization that wool was given to the sheep not for its use, but for ours. Others have insisted that the gift of the earth must be treasured. The gift of good land for the agrarianist Wendell Berry must be stewarded with care. For Pope Francis, the earth that has been given to us must be preserved for others yet to come. What is common to these interpretations, however, is that they are unidirectional. There can be no real reciprocity for a gift from God. This is illustrated most clearly in the philosophy of Georges Bataille and Jacques Derrida, for whom the gift consists in a pure and absolute form of generosity that exceeds the possibility of return altogether and thereby stands outside the logic of exchange. Another tradition understands the gift differently, not in terms of unilateral or unconditional generosity, but as something that carries the expectation of reciprocity. Many indigenous peoples, too, describe the land and its fruits as gifts. The Anishinabeg, Winona LaDuke writes, describe wild rice as a gift from the Creator. The Potawatomi botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer writes of wild strawberries as gifts from the earth. But true gifts, Kimmerer observes, are not free. They must be replenished and returned. Gifts form lasting relationships. They create social obligations and demand responses. For anthropologists like Marcel Mauss and Carl Polanyi, it is the fundamentally reciprocal nature of the gift that illustrates the possibility of exchange without the commodity form. The gift stands as the central social relation of non-capitalist societies. For all their differences, both of these accounts of the gift as an expression of pure generosity on the one hand and a relationship of radical reciprocity on the other posit the gift as an alternative to the commodity. Gifts either defy the possibility of return and thus the logic of market exchange, or require a kind of ongoing response that is antithetical to commercial transactions. Gifts are often taken to reflect an ethic rather than a calculation, an emphasis on altruism or community rather than individual gain. They are said to be of a different order than the commodity and the market. Whatever gifts are, after all, it is clear that they are not bought and sold. The peculiar paradoxical kind of gift addressed in this book, however, the free gift of nature, is different from either of these. This term, free gift, is an odd one. Relative to common meanings of the gift, it seems either redundant or oxymoronic. If a gift is understood as pure generosity, then to call something a free gift is superfluous. If gifts are never really free, by contrast, then the phrase seems like a contradiction in terms. In fact, the modifier free is telling. It provides a clue that the free gift is not timeless or universal, but rather a category defined in relation to the market. The free gift of nature is free in the sense of costless, gratuitous. It denotes that something is priced at zero. The free gift, then, is not an alternative to the capitalist commodity at all. Rather, the free gift is a distinctly capitalist social form, no less central to capitalism than more familiar concepts like the commodity and the wage. Key to the free gift of nature is the disjuncture between its obvious usefulness, even its seeming invaluableness, and its utter lack of value in economic terms. The paradox is that the free gift is valuable because it is free, because it provides something materially useful without cost. It is this feature, this dual character, that gives coherence to the wide variety of concrete activities that the free gift names. One unifies steam power, sheep organs, and soil fertility, and other natural agents as a category is not their qualitative features, which are remarkably different in both material function and anthropocentric use, but rather their non-appearance in the form of value. The free gift is the form nature takes in societies in which commodity exchange is generalized as the primary means of acquiring and distributing the goods necessary for subsistence. The free gift is also the commodity's shadow. Following its spectral trace can take us into dimensions of capitalism often left unexplored. While capitalism is associated with commodification, the free gift reveals commodification's limits, limits set not by a society seeking to protect itself from the market, but by the market itself. It serves as a reminder that capitalism may be operative even where its telltale signs, that is, exchange value, wages, are not immediately in evidence. It draws our attention to activities that have clear effects in the material world but do not seem to register in the sphere of the economy. It foregrounds concrete processes often neglected by analyses of the abstract realms of value and money, finance, and exchange, and shows how physical qualities figure into even these abstractions. It reminds us, in other words, of the material content that always attends social forms. Nature, as Theodore Adorno insists, always remains non-identical with the terms we use to describe it. Objects do not go into their concepts without leaving a remainder. This book is fundamentally interested in these remainders, in the aspects of the world that overspill the bounds of capitalist social form that are not easily contained within capitalist labor processes that appear as aberrations in both the physical organization of the world and the concepts used to make sense of it. It is about the things that are left over when capital has commodified what it can and what capital abandons or abdicates rather than absorbing. It is about the unwanted residuals of production, forms of surplus matter whose negative effects go unreflected in exchange value. It is about the gifts that give too freely to be expropriated, and the kinds of nature whose qualities and capacities, however extraordinary, are surplus to capital's needs. It is also about the kinds of human labor that can't easily be organized by the wage and the boss, and that persist in seemingly anachronistic forms, or that even seem to be free gifts themselves. Looking at the free gift, in other words, not only gives us a new perspective on nature, but casts capitalism itself in new light. The analysis of capitalism can help us understand the current state of the natural world, and so, too, can the analysis of nature help us understand capitalism. My analysis of nature and capitalism makes three interventions in particular. The first is to offer a theory of the free gift of nature as a capitalist social form, attending to its dual character, that is, its concrete reality as physical substance, and the way that this substance appears within capitalist social relations. The second is to offer a critique of capitalism's treatment of nature rooted not only in capitalism's environmental consequences, but also in what those consequences indicate about our ability to act freely. The third is to follow the free gift into the world, showing what happens when social relations hit the literal ground, tracking the unusual phenomena that result from this collision, the conceptual apparatuses developed to make sense of them, and the political struggles that have erupted around them. I'm going to stop here because I'm at the close of my time, and we're halfway through. So tomorrow I'll finish the introduction with theorizing the free gift. I hope that you'll take a look at her book and begin reading it, because I think it's worth reading. I think there's some concepts that she's going to flesh out in the book that are worth considering, and I think she's done it, with all due respect, in a sort of counterfactual way, picking folks who stand in contrast to some of these concepts, or allow the concept of free gift to be articulated in interesting ways. Now, with all due respect, it is a certain type of construction. It is, yes, it's still Marxist. And I think it's a new way of trying to accommodate, at least from, relative to its origins, that is, in political thought, as opposed to political economy, although it certainly requires that to embrace the political element of the economy. So I would assert that this is a good text to work from. It is not canonical by any means, but it does allow us to not just simply seize on the notion of the free gift, because that is certainly a moment in political thought and the history of intellectual thought that is important for subsequent centuries. This notion of, with all due respect, a liberal construction of freedom, as it were. And in fact, I would welcome or appreciate the intervention of someone who might present or work on this from a quote unquote more libertarian point of view. So I think those things are ahead of us, and I would hope that that's what we can appreciate when we get to it. So what I've been looking at is the first half of the introduction to Alyssa Battistoni's Free Gifts, Capitalism, and the Politics of Nature, 2025, Princeton University Press. A useful book, 329 pages. Needless to say, Battistoni recovers and reinterprets the idea of the free gift of nature used by classical economic thinkers to describe what we gratuitously obtain from the natural world, and builds on Karl Marx's critique of political economy to show how capitalism fundamentally treats nature as free for the taking. Now, that's this fundamental notion, but there are lots of transformations, some of which were, with all due respect, unfinished by Marx, and in some ways clearly hinted at, the thing that he was going to get to, and that because we're filling it in, the free for the taking is different. Perhaps we need to take a different view of it, that is, the formal and the informal, a variety of useful dichotomies. So I like thinking that this book is useful to point in other directions. It helps frame a certain set of arguments, for example, as I just mentioned, between the informal and the formal economy, as well as a variety of other things that have to do with, for example, the economies of the psychiatric, as it were, of the economy of desire in that particular sense. Now, that's pushing it much further, and I think she herself would acknowledge that that exists, but we'll get there eventually. Thank you very much. I will now get us off the live stream.